My mom's psycho ex-boyfriend put my family first on his to unalive list. He took this list seriously. When I was 13, my parents got divorced, and 2 years later my mother ended up reconnecting with a former fling named Sam. I remember my mom speaking very highly of this man, in ways she never really did about my father when they were together. Sam had lost his daughter to cancer and his former wife to sewer slide, and my mom was the first woman he was talking to after losing his family. Sam experienced brain damage after getting into a fight with some junkies to defend someone else they were attacking, and my mom couldn't stop talking about how brave he was. The only thing that halted their relationship was that Sam lived in a different state. For my 16th birthday, I had begged my dad to see this musical that was touring, and was making a stop in a city in California close enough to make a day trip out of. My dad agreed. It was going to be him and I for the weekend, and I was elated. Until my mother found out that the city we were visiting was the same city that Sam lived in. My mother begged to come along with us, so her and Sam could spend the weekend together, and while I was hesitant, my father agreed. Even after divorcing, he still wanted to do whatever to make her happy. I, on the other hand, was not happy about having my mom tag along, even for the car ride, but my dad convinced me that it was for my mom's sake, and everything would be fine, so I begrudgingly agreed to have her travel with us to California. The plan was that my dad would drop my mom off at Sam's house, where she would spend the night, take him and I to go see the musical, get dinner together, return to a hotel, and then pick my mom up the next day. Everything was going according to plan up to this point. The musical was fantastic, and my dad and I were having a great time. When him and I were eating at the restaurant, he got a text message from my mother, and that is when things started to go downhill. My dad seemed nonchalant about what was going on, but was clearly invested in this text message conversation he was having, so I started to pry. He explained that he and I would be picking my mom up after dinner, instead of tomorrow. I ask why, and he says that it's adult stuff and he can't tell me. A couple minutes pass, me still eating, and my dad still texting my mom, and he informs me that we aren't picking her up, that things progressed and he is sending an Uber to pick my mom up immediately. We wait in the restaurant until my mom arrives in the Uber. I'm growing more and more curious about what happened, but don't pry too much, because I assume that something went wrong with my mom and Sam romantically, or possibly sexually. When my mom arrives, and we all load up into my dad's car, she begins to talk, eerily calm the entire time. She explains that her and Sam were having a fine time at first, watching a movie and cuddling, and when things started to take a more adult turn, Sam started crying and talking about how much he missed his wife and daughter. My mom tried consoling him, but it wasn't working, and he kept trying to make advances towards my mother while in this emotional state. My mom started to get a weird feeling about it, and made up a lie to Sam that she got a text from me saying that I fell ill and wanted her to come back to the hotel, and she had to leave. Sam immediately flipped, going from mourning to anger. He started yelling at my mom, telling that she couldn't leave. When she insisted, he punched the wall so hard that his hand broke, and he had to go to the ER, giving my mom an opportunity to leave. I was floored. Despite barely being 16, I was old enough to recognize the telltale signs of an abuser, and alarms were going off in my mom. Despite my shock, and fear on my mother's behalf, my mother seemed calm, even insisting that she felt bad for Sam, because of his wife and daughter, and his brain damage, and now his broken hand. My mother behaving like everything was alright confused me to no end, but we were heading back to the hotel, and leaving California in the morning, so I didn't push too hard. Things continued to escalate from this point. Once we get to the hotel, my mom receives a text from Sam, saying that when they tested his blood at the ER, he tested positive for HERPS, and it was my mom's fault and he was going to sue her. For context, both my parents are HERPS positive. My mom is upfront about this with her partners. My mom talks to some of her friends in the medical field after this, and they raise some concern at this. Why would they test his blood for diseases when he is in the ER for a broken hand? Not to mention, HERPS takes days, if not weeks, to show up in the bloodstream. It is impossible that he would have gotten that from my mom. Despite this, my mom still continues to express sympathy towards him. It's late by this point, so we head to bed. My dad snores louder than any other person I have ever met, and not quite thinking ahead, I didn't bring any earplugs or headphones with me. I asked my mom if I could borrow her phone and earbuds to listen to music while I sleep, to drown out my dad's snores. She agrees, and I pull up some random music to make you fall asleep YouTube video and lay down to get some rest. Unfortunately for me, at least once every half hour, my mom gets a phone call from Sam, interrupting the video, lulling me to sleep. I turn the ringer off, too close to sleep to fully understand what's going on, but it's to no avail. The incoming call pauses the music, thus allowing me to hear my dad snoring and waking me up, again and again and again. I somehow manage to get some sleep, but by the time it's morning, my mom has dozens of missed calls from this guy. I believe he left voicemails as well, but I'll be honest in admitting that I don't quite remember what he said. Nothing good, I know. My mom still doesn't recognize this behavior as odd, and my dad seems to be keeping his mouth shut, so without any fanfare, we pack up and leave the hotel, beginning our drive out of California and back home. We're about an hour or so outside of the city. I'm sitting up front with my dad, and my mom in the back, on her phone, when my mom tells my dad to pull over at the next stop. He does, and they get out of the car and start talking. They're too far away from the car for me to hear anything. After a couple minutes, my mom gets back inside the car, and I ask her what happened. She explains that she's been receiving non-stop texts from Sam during the duration of the drive so far, Texts claiming that he has friends in the police force who he is going to convince to mark my dad as a child lover and rapist, neither of which is true, and then calls CPS to get me taken away from my family. Texts detailing his firearm collection, how everyone in his life leaves him, how everyone in his life hurts him, how he has our address, how he has a list of everyone in his life who has ever hurt him, and my mom and us are at the top of his list, and he's going to be getting his revenge. My dad is on the phone with the police outside as she explains this. Once we're back home, miles away from Sam, my mom receives even more texts from him. I know you called the police on me. They showed up to my house, searched everything and found nothing. I'm still here and I'm not leaving. My mom immediately calls the police again, and speaks to the same woman my parents spoke to before. My mom explains the text that she got, and asks the dispatcher why he wasn't detained or anything. He's clearly a threat to himself and to others. The dispatcher is confused, and explains to my mom that Sam isn't at home still. The police arrested him, and he was being held in a psychiatric hospital. There was no way for him to still have his phone on him, but somehow, he did. We don't hear from Sam after this phone call. The dispatcher must have informed who she needed to inform, and his phone was properly confiscated. Things are pretty silent for the next few days. My mom decides to call Sam's sister, having known her from when my mom and Sam first dated, and getting back in contact during this current relationship. My mom explains the situation, and Sam's sister is beyond horrified, and apologizing for her brother's behalf. My mom still tries to empathize with Sam, saying that the loss of his wife and daughter must have been what caused him to spiral like this. Sam's sister stops her, confused. Sam's daughter never died of cancer, and his wife never unalived herself. They simply divorced, the ex-wife gaining custody of the daughter. I think it was at that moment it finally hit my mom how serious the situation was, and how deeply ill this man she once loved was.